This isn't a rumor. This isn't a whisper. This is the moment the fairy tale fractures, when one question detonates the entire Sussex story. What if the truth about Lilibet was never what we were told? They told us to feel. They told us to mourn. They told us to believe. But tonight, belief collides with something far darker, doubt sharpened into a blade. It starts the way all the most dangerous stories do, with a scene so emotional it disarms you before you can think. A hospital, a global lockdown, streets silent, the world frozen, and two people wrapped in grief, walking away with what they claim is the remains of a lost child. According to their own words, they buried that loss beneath the banyan tree. A sacred goodbye, private, poetic, cinematic, too cinematic. Because once the tears dry, the details begin to scream. People familiar with the area quietly ask the first forbidden question: where did the banyan tree come from? Because it doesn't grow there. Not now. Not ever. Medical professionals raise another eyebrow. Hospitals don't release fetal remains for backyard burials. Not during COVID. Not ever. Partners weren't even allowed into emergency rooms at the time. And yet the story insists he was there. Hands bare, earth dug. A ritual performed like a movie scene written for maximum impact. At first, no one dared challenge it. Grief is sacred. Loss is personal. But truth doesn't bend just because the story is emotional. Then the math enters the room. Quietly, relentlessly. They say the miscarriage happened in July 2020. Less than a year later, a healthy, full-term baby arrives. Count it. Subtract recovery. Subtract healing. Subtract the biological reality of pregnancy. The numbers don't just feel off. They collapse. Entire months vanish. Women everywhere begin doing the math for themselves. Women who've lived through miscarriage. Women who know what the body can and cannot do. And the numbers don't lie. Add another detail. A toddler son, still being lifted daily. Carried. Hoisted. Something doctors strongly advise against during late pregnancy or recovery. Yet there were no visible limits. No slowing down. No signs of physical strain. Just a smooth glide into the next chapter. No explanations. No corrections. Just forward motion. That's when the discomfort turns cold. Because medical experts, voices with nothing to sell and no loyalty to drama, start breaking it down. At nearly 40, miscarriage risk rises sharply. Chromosomal abnormalities are common. And when miscarriages happen, they're usually early, quiet, medically managed. Not dramatic emergencies with poetic rituals attached. Stress doesn't cause miscarriage the way it was publicly blamed. Lawsuits don't cause miscarriage. Media pressure doesn't cause miscarriage. Biology does. So when the blame was shifted outward, onto the press, onto stress, onto invisible villains, doctors bristled. Because that message plants guilt where there should be none. It tells grieving women that their loss was someone's fault. That if life had been calmer, the baby would still be here. That's not truth. That's narrative. And when that narrative was published, something strange happened. Women didn't feel seen. They felt unsettled. Real miscarriage survivors spoke up. Not cruelly, not loudly, but honestly. They said the account felt wrong, too polished, too performative. The emotional beats didn't match their lived reality. No hospital theatrics, no ceremonial remains, no poetic singing through pain, just shock, silence, and emptiness. One woman called it grotesque. Another said it turned something sacred into content. And threaded through all their voices was the same quiet realization: this wasn't written to heal. It was written to be consumed. And then the spotlight shifts, away from the loss, and onto the woman telling the story. Because people from her past start stepping forward. Not strangers, not trolls, friends. A childhood confidante reveals conversations long buried, fertility fears, egg freezing, endometriosis, and then the most explosive claim of all, a hysterectomy at 28. Another woman backs it up, speaking of debilitating pain and life-altering medical decisions. No official confirmation, no medical records released. But these aren't anonymous posts on the internet. These are people who once stood inside her inner circle. And suddenly, the puzzle pieces start refusing to fit. Because publicly, the story is effortless fertility, smooth pregnancies, no complications, no struggle, no limits. Privately, according to those who knew her before fame, the story was very different. Two realities, one spotlight. And then comes the moment that chills everything. Australia, 2018. Behind palace walls, away from cameras, tension explodes. Staff whisper about chaos, about last-minute demands. about a tour hijacked by personal announcements. And during one argument, overheard, unplanned, raw, a question slips out that should never exist in a marriage. Are you really pregnant? Let that land. That isn't tabloid invention. That isn't internet speculation. That's a sentence heavy with doubt, spoken, allegedly, by the one person who should have known for certain. Observers noticed it afterward. The strain. The distance. The misery that clung to him throughout the tour. Why would that question ever be asked? What did he see? What didn't he understand? And why did the cracks show then? Because from that point on, nothing is simple anymore. And just when the public thinks the story can't get stranger, a new voice emerges. Not from a palace, not from the media, but from a mother in Costa Rica. She claims her daughter was asked to stand in, to pose, to play a role, to be presented as a child who, according to her, wasn't there at all. No payment, no children traveling with the couple, an early departure, an unpaid hotel bill, photos that don't resemble previous images. And suddenly, what once felt unthinkable becomes impossible to ignore. Then come the screenshots, announcements that appear and vanish. One version naming a palace, another naming a cottage, one claiming surrogacy, both disappearing without explanation. No corrections, no denials, just silence. And silence, when facts are demanded, is deafening. By now, this isn't gossip, it's a pattern. A story told with emotional force but factual fragility. Timelines that wobble. Medical realities that refuse to cooperate. Witnesses stepping out of the shadows. And a single name sitting at the center of it all. Lilibet. And that's where we stop. Because what comes next doesn't just raise questions. It threatens to detonate the entire legacy. Because once the question, who is Lilibet, is spoken out loud, the entire room changes. The air thickens, the walls close in. And suddenly, every carefully curated image from the Sussex world starts flickering like a bad signal. This is where the story stops pretending it's emotional and starts behaving like a cover-up. Think about it. For public figures who share everything, their pain, their trauma, their grievances, there is one thing that remains strangely elusive. Proof that doesn't move. No consistent photos, no clear timelines. No neutral witnesses, just images released on their terms, cropped, filtered, delayed, and often contradicted by the next set. And when people noticed, they were told they were cruel, obsessed, dangerous. But here's the truth no one wanted to say out loud. Asking questions is not cruelty when the story itself keeps changing. Because the children, especially Lilibet, don't appear the way royal children always have. Not casually, not accidentally, not organically. They appear strategically, on anniversaries, in documentaries, in controlled releases, and then they vanish again. No school runs, no playground sightings, no neighbors, no staff willing to go on record, just silhouettes, just backs of heads, just carefully timed reveals. And the more people tried to reconcile that with reality, the more unsettling it became. Then came the whispers from within royal circles. Not loud enough to quote, but too consistent to ignore. Staff who had worked around royal children for decades quietly admitted something felt off. Not sinister at first, just unusual. Children don't exist in a vacuum. They ripple outward. They change schedules. They leave traces. But in Montecito, there were no ripples, only silence. And silence, in a story this public, is not neutral. That's when attention returned to the pregnancies themselves, not emotionally, but physically. Footage replayed, frames slowed, dresses examined, movements scrutinized, and suddenly what once looked like glowing maternity began to behave strangely. Shapes shifted, angles changed. A bump appeared firm one day and collapsed the next, pressed inward, folded. Women who had been pregnant froze when they saw it, because bodies don't do that. Not like that. Midwives, obstetric nurses, mothers of 3 and 4, they all said the same thing in private conversations. This doesn't look right. Not because pregnancy is uniform, but because physics still applies. And yet, every time this was raised, it was dismissed as harassment. But here's the problem. Harassment doesn't create screenshots. Harassment doesn't rewrite announcements. Harassment doesn't explain why official statements appear, disappear, and reappear with altered details. Someone was managing this story aggressively, correcting perception, adjusting narrative, plugging leaks. Why? That's when the alleged witness accounts began to stack up. Not just one, but several. Different countries. Different timelines. The same unsettling theme, children presented briefly, then removed. Interactions rushed. No extended presence. No continuity. One source described it chillingly. It felt like a stage exit, not like a family. And then, behind all of it, stands the figure of the investigator, the man who didn't invent the questions, but refused to look away from them. A man known for something deeply inconvenient, following paper trails, not emotions. What he uncovered wasn't a smoking gun, it was worse. A web of inconsistencies so dense that untangling one thread only revealed 3 more. Why was there no independent verification of births? Why were royal protocols followed selectively, sometimes invoked, sometimes ignored? Why did stories evolve after publication instead of before? And most chilling of all, why was every request for clarity met not with facts, but with fury? Because fury is a defense mechanism. And by now, the defense was frantic. The Sussex narrative had become a fortress, guarded not by evidence, but by outrage. Question the story, and you were heartless. Question the details, and you were accused of something darker. But none of that answered the core issue. Where is the consistency? Where is the unbroken line of truth? Where are the answers that don't require faith? Because faith is not how lineage works. Faith is not how history works. And faith is certainly not how truth survives scrutiny. And so we arrive at the final, unavoidable realization, the one that makes this story radioactive. If even one part of this narrative is false, then everything built on top of it becomes unstable. If the miscarriage story was embellished, if the pregnancy timelines were compressed, if surrogacy was involved but hidden, if stand-ins were used for appearances, then the issue is no longer privacy. It's legitimacy. Not emotional legitimacy, historical legitimacy. Because royal history doesn't care about feelings. It records facts. And facts, once questioned, demand resolution. And that is why this story refuses to die. Because no matter how many documentaries are released, no matter how many interviews are staged, no matter how many critics are silenced, the questions remain. Who carried the children? Who witnessed the births? Why do the details keep shifting? And why does transparency feel like the one thing that can never be offered? This isn't about hating a woman. This isn't about attacking a family. This is about a narrative that asks the world to believe and then punish the world for noticing the cracks. And those cracks now run directly through the name Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. Not because of anything she did, but because of what may have been done around her. And until the story stops changing, until the answers stop hiding behind emotion, until clarity replaces outrage, this mystery will not close. It will only grow louder. Because secrets don't stay buried forever. Not under banyan trees that don't exist, not under timelines that don't add up, and not under stories told too beautifully to be true. And somewhere, behind all the noise, the truth is still waiting, watching, ready. And when it finally steps into the light, it won't just rewrite one chapter.